Who goes bankrupt first? Hey, this is Warren Reddick. I'm here with Brian Wang. We're going to talk about Tesla, and we're going to talk about other car companies that we think are going to go bankrupt, and who's going to go first, and when are they going to go bankrupt. Does that sound like a good way to talk about it, Brian?
Yes, it does. Other than the fact that pure bankruptcy, like they'll get in super big trouble, just like they've had before. Just like Chrysler kind of gets bankrupt and comes in and out and still exists, right? Or, got swallowed up by Stellantis.
Okay,
But,
so we're going to talk about them going bankrupt, and we're going to talk about the aftermath of their bankruptcies, their bailouts, and beyond. The existing car companies are going to go under, that they cannot possibly survive what's coming from Tesla. That Tesla is going to increase production from 500,000 vehicles last year to close to maybe 900,000 this year, to 2 million the following year, to 5 million, 10 million, 20 million vehicles. The onset of robo-taxis will make self-driving electric vehicles replace many vehicles at once. Typical robo-taxi might replace 5 to 10 vehicles, and this will basically destroy the market for existing internal combustion engine cars that don't drive themselves. And Ford, General Motors, Volkswagen, Toyota, Honda, etc., will not be able to adapt fast enough to survive that. What's your take on it?
The existing car companies are already in big trouble. They are very financially weak already in terms of the amount of debt they have and other issues. They can survive in a somewhat diminished state, just like GM went from 45% of the US car market to 16% as the Japanese and the European car makers came in. Just like GM in the 70s and then in the 80s went down from 45% US market share, eventually down to about 16% today, that the existing car companies can survive in this very reduced state. But the quality of difference now, which is that it's not just cutting ICE cars and saying, okay, I'm going to sell fewer ICE cars and this is how many I have. It's saying, okay, I need to cut these cars and convert to the new thing and then fight for market share in the new thing. Just like the market share in plug-in cars is different from the pure ICE car market share. So they never kind of, Toyota dominates in the hybrid areas because of the Prius, and then whoever else gets in there in this new thing. So that is a kind of example of a slightly less of a change, but somewhat similar, like similar changes of losing share, similar scenarios in terms of shifting to something new and the old market share not predicting the new market shares.
Well, what do you think about my theory that number one, Tesla is going to produce, let's say, 5 million cars a year?
I think it's becoming very clear, especially with the new numbers out of China, that the rumors in recent months where Model Y is up to 1,000 per day, and Model 3 is at 800. That's showing I think that could be showing the power of the stamping of the front and back. That is, I think, what is if that's all true, that's what's the precursor of the far better front and back and mid structural battery that's going to happen in Texas and Berlin. So then I'm very optimistic for, Berlin and Austin possibly getting to 1 million each or whatever. And then the mass amount of batteries they're going to get from CATL.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just spell out what I see coming.
Yeah.
The existing factories that we know about should probably produce 5 to 6 million a year. Between Fremont and Shanghai, Giga Berlin producing Ys and probably 3s, Giga Texas producing Ys, 3s, and Cybertrucks. I'm leaving out Semi and S, and well, I guess I'll leave in S and X, but I'm leaving out Semi and Roadster because I think they're very low volume. And on top of that, 2023 or 2024, we're going to see a new round of factories producing the 2023, the Battery Day vehicle that they hinted at. And I think that's going to be produced in much higher volumes. So I actually see Tesla going to 10, 20 million vehicles a year. And in the current car market where maybe car makers worldwide sell, in a good year, 90 million cars, that's a really big drop in sales for the other car companies. That's leaving out the robo-taxi effect, right? Just if they produce 20 million cars, that takes 20 million sales away from the other car companies. Some of the other car companies are going to take a bigger hit than others, but that loss of sales might wipe them all out. So you take Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, GM, they sell a lot of cars. they're going to lose some sales.
Yep.
And the way I see it, they have a lot of debt, and the way they pay their debt is they sell enough cars and make enough profit on the cars they sell to pay off the debt.
Right.
I mean, I think all four of those have over $100 billion in debt.
Right.
If their sales decline by 10% or 20%, that cuts into their profits enough that they may not be able to make their debt payments anymore. I think they won't be able to make their debt payments anymore.
Right.
That means they go bankrupt. And then the next step, of course, is, I think you and I both expect, governments are likely to bail them out.
Right.
But okay, so let me ask you this question. I have my opinion on this. Before I say mine, I'll ask you yours. What happens after they get bailed out? Let's take Ford.
Mm-hmm.
Ford goes bankrupt. They are able to wipe out their $100+ billion in debt.
Mm-hmm.
What does Ford operate like after it clears that debt? What does Ford's operations look like going forward from that?
Be scaled to a reduced market share. They would have to have built in, say that happened in 2024, Cybertruck's going good. They've launched their Lightning. It's doing okay, but it's at like 100,000. So they go from 1 million ICE F-150s down to 100,000, maybe 150,000 of the Lightning. They already dropped, I think, all of their regular passenger car model lines.
Well, they haven't dropped all of it, but they've reduced their regular passenger cars.
Right,
yeah.
Reduced all that. So if they go bankrupt, then they'll look at the state on the ground, see, okay, how much has Tesla got, how much we're expecting, and then they'll make a plan based on the clear facts on the ground situation in 2024 or whatever, 2023, when they are in bankruptcy, and then they relaunch in 2 or 3 years, just the way they were in not Ford, but GM and Stellantis were in that bailout mode in 2008 through 2011, that they were on life support because of the financial crisis, and then they relaunch out of it with their bailouts of whatever money, but maybe a more serious version of that.
I don't agree that it's going to happen that way.
Okay.
But supposing it does happen that way, do you think they'll be competitive once they do that?
No, I don't think. I think they have to pretty much bend the knee to Tesla and get Tesla's skateboard part of the car and then build on top of that, because Ford and GM, they have their deals with LG and blah blah blah, and they're very low in terms of their amount of batteries they're going to get. They're saying I'm going to get to 40 gigawatt hours in 2026 or something like that. It's a pathetic amount of volume. And if the whole world is battery constrained, then, and they're also technology inferior in terms of all the electronics and other parts of it, then they need, just the way they currently get suppliers that make their engines or not engines, but necessarily, main components, a transmission or steering and other stuff. So the OEMs assemble their vehicle from parts made by other vehicles. So if all the parts are made better by Tesla, then they should just do that. They should just take them as suppliers, switch supply chains during the bankruptcy and say, take the good stuff, right? As opposed to take inferior stuff. They have to have a competitive thing, like you say. And I think that means getting far stronger partners.
Okay, so I don't think it happens that way.
Okay.
I think that a condition of any bailout coming from a government that wants to protect the United Auto Workers, the government is bailing them out not because they want to benefit Ford shareholders. Right? The Ford shareholders are going to lose everything.
Yeah.
The government is bailing them out because they want to protect the jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to agree to bail them out with a situation where Ford gets to lay off a lot of workers and cut off their supply chain and cut off jobs in the supply chain. That's not how the politicians are going to be thinking about it.
Okay.
Right? The politicians are going to be thinking, hey, wait a minute, we don't want you to eliminate all these jobs.
Yeah.
We're doing this so you don't eliminate all these jobs. And I mean, I think so. Let me make my case for it. Number one, any bailout will be conditioned on conditions that make it more difficult for Ford and General Motors, and the same thing in Germany and the same thing in Japan. The conditions of any bailout would make it harder for them to compete with Tesla. They would have to protect the dealers. The car dealers are tremendously politically connected. They're in every They're in every congressional district, every state.
Mhm.
They make a lot of campaign contributions. They are connected with all the members of Congress, all the senators.
Mhm.
They are politically influential. They're going to get protected in any bailout. The United Auto Workers is very influential. Labor unions in general are very influential, at least with the Democratic Party.
Mhm.
So, and with Republicans and and states that have big union presence.
Yeah.
The supply chains themselves won't go bankrupt. Like say Magna might not necessarily go bankrupt, but the companies that are the supply chain currently for the car companies, they're going to want to be protected.
Yeah.
So any bailout, whether it's in the United States or other countries, is probably going to be tied to protecting some of the things that make the existing car makers uncompetitive already.
Mhm.
Right? So I don't think it works. And I don't really think Tesla's going to have enough battery supply and manufacturing capacity to supply. Well, maybe they will eventually. But what would be in it for Tesla to supply skateboards and batteries to Ford and GM when they could just make the cars themselves? What does Tesla get out of that?
Tesla would charge it at the margin of a full car, so they would or nearly. So they would, and also they would work in the FSD so they get more data. And
so what work do the OEMs actually do?
they're making the shell and the seats and the little bits and pieces and doing the service. They don't get much. I'm not saying they get much. But
I'm saying, what's their value add, and how do they justify? How many employees do they have if that's all they're doing?
They are a shell of what they were. Just like GM went from 45% to 16%, you can drop 1/3, and you can drop a huge amount. And the most recent bankruptcy, I think for Renault and whatever, some reorganization, stuff like that, they did lay off tens of thousands of people. So they resized. I think from we're going to make so many millions of cars, and now we're a little bit over half. So they can resize in a reorg and say, okay, those plans were no good, and now we're shrinking down to something that's sustainable, or at least for a little while. And maybe that doesn't work. Like they only do because of the pressures that you talk about, the UAW and the other things. So they do a half-baked restructuring. They end up being bankrupt again in 3 to 5 years, right?
Well, that's another question. Once they go through that bankruptcy, is somebody going to lend them money?
You have these revolving door companies. How many times did Chrysler go out of business and then get bought by something else?
Do the bondholders get bailed out when Ford and GM go bankrupt, or the bondholders lose?
Apparently, with the corporate bond bailouts right now for the Treasury, how good are your connections really? Because Goldman gets bailed out, Lehman doesn't, right? Right now, the Fed is buying up corporate bonds. It's 1-2% is Toyota, GM, Ford. So they're already getting bailed out on their bonds right now. And in that 2008 bond crisis, they bought, I think, $30 or $40 billion of the bonds or other things, and they resold them for a $10 billion loss. So the government would eat it in that scenario where they end up being worthless or near worthless or whatever it ended up being. I think their political connection is strong enough that substantially they'll be held together. But for Ford and GM, and then for the main European ones, a smaller company, not as good connections, they get totally vaporized.
So let's try this. Who goes bankrupt first?
Volkswagen has a 73% chance of going into financial distress in the next 2 years. That's according to an analysis by a company that track how weak the companies are. And that's using the Z-score and several other scores related to their thing. I think it's because they've been weakened so much by that Dieselgate thing, right? Where they got fined $15 billion or whatever it was. That has weakened them. And then, if they also do badly with ID4 being a disappointment, where they overbuild and then they don't sell as many, then if that continues to happen, where they keep launching and failing with the stuff, then they're spending money. They don't have that much of it, and they're spending $30 billion, $50 billion, and they get negative return on their money. Possibly the weakest and one of the first to go. And also Volkswagen, because they have Audi and some other ones, those are prime targets of losing share to Model Y. So they're first in line on that. So that makes them one of the weakest things. BMW also in line there, but they're a bit financially stronger. But they are
financially stronger, meaning BMW doesn't have as much debt.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Debt relative,
and they have higher profit margins.
Yeah, higher profit margins and stuff like that. Yes.
But I mean, BMW, as I look at it, BMW has relatively low debt, and they have kind of a diverse product line and maybe more customer loyalty.
Yeah.
I think that, I feel like people I know, BMW has a certain cachet that Volkswagen doesn't have. You think Volkswagen might be the first to go?
Yes, I think Volkswagen might be the first. Major ones. Like you can have small, whatever companies, like the various startups, they could flame out. But of the legacy guys, the big ones, the really famous ones, the top ones, Nissan could blow up, because they're already also jacked up with their CEO thing. But then I think Japan sustains them.
Volkswagen, they own Audi, you mentioned, and Audi. Tesla's cars compete directly with Audi, BMW, and Mercedes. Right. I think that's actually an interesting question. Do we know? Because I think we've seen like reports of what vehicles get traded in most for Tesla cars, and it's not necessarily BMWs, Mercedes, and Audis.
Right.
We see them as competitive with those vehicles, but I think we also see that owners of Toyota Priuses, for example, might be more likely to buy a Tesla because they're environmentally conscious.
Right.
So and I see the Model Y competing directly with, say, the Toyota Highlander or the Toyota RAV4, which are very large sellers.
Right.
The Ford Escape, the Ford Explorer.
Right.
So, I mean, I actually would say you have the pickup truck market, right? And you have Cybertruck coming in probably sometime in 2022 and really taking a big share, a growing share starting in 2023. We tend to think that hits Ford hard, but Ford might have the most brand loyalty. So it might actually cut into Stellantis, which is Dodge, Dodge Ram, and it might actually cut into Chevrolet, GM more because they may not have as much customer loyalty. And you also have like Toyota has some pickups and Honda has the Ridgeline. I don't know if the Ridgeline.
Well, the other thing
seller.
is the whole $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill with $10,000 and $12,000 for EVs. Tesla would tend to look like it might be in line for $10,000 things. That means the $40,000 and $50,000 Tesla models drop $10,000 in price. So suddenly, in terms of the ICE, like all the EVs get $10,000 better. The ICE vehicles do not. So then the Tesla dropping down in class $10,000 means that they are directly going against the Camry. They're directly going against Corolla. They're going against that other mid-range car. And then same for the truck. So then by all of these governments supporting accelerating the move to EVs means that ICE gets it harder and faster.
Well, I would say that they started talking about that EV tax credit, and then the lobbyists from Ford and General Motors and the other car companies figured out, wait a minute, Tesla's going to get a hell of a lot more out of us than we are.
Right.
And I don't think the EV tax credit's going to happen.
You think it's not going to happen? Okay.
Well, if you believe that government is run by, at least U.S. government is run by special interests,
right?
Do the special interests benefit? The special interests who lobby government, do they benefit from having the EV tax credit? And the answer is, well, Tesla benefits a lot, and Tesla buyers benefit a lot.
Yeah.
But Ford and GM get clobbered, right? Ford, GM, and Stellantis get clobbered, and the Volkswagen and Toyota probably have a lot of lobbyists too. They get clobbered because the company that makes the most EVs benefits the most,
right?
And the company that's able to sell their EVs benefits the most. And Tesla is going to make a lot more EVs than anybody else, and people actually want to buy them as compared to the ID4 and the Mach-E and I think the interesting player there is the F-150 Lightning, which I think is what do you think about the F-150 Lightning are you into trucks at all? Do you have any thoughts about the characteristics of the vehicle?
I personally am only interested in Cybertrucks. That's the first truck I'm ever going to get. And I look at F-150 just to see, is that going to save Ford? So the specs on it look decent. For the Ford loyalists, I've talked to someone who has like trucks and that kind of stuff, and they're looking to, very seriously looking at a mid-tier Ford F-150 Lightning. So it is, they're holding on to enough of that brand loyalty. So the issue is that they're only currently planning to make I think 150,000 up until 2026, unless they somehow accelerate their plan to do whatever. How much they scale, into 2030 is a huge question. But I personally don't think that they'll be able to get to more than 300,000 or so. And then this all presumes that things go right with the launch.
When you say 150,000 in 2026, you mean total by the end of 2026, or 150,000 a year in 2026?
150,000 per year if they able to hit their targets and everything goes right for them. Right?
Okay, and they sell about 1 million regular F-150s a year, right?
Right.
So that's a small share of their overall pickup truck sales. So let me disagree with you on the specs. The F-150 Lightning is, I believe, longer and taller than Cybertruck.
Mm-hmm.
About the same width, I think.
Yep.
Has a smaller bed, has a 5.5 foot bed instead of a 6.5 foot bed.
Yep.
Cybertruck, I'm predicting, will weigh less than 5,000 pounds. I can explain why I think that when if you want to ask. But F-150 Lightning, the light one, the 230 mile range one, will weigh 6,500 pounds.
Yep.
So more than 1,500 pounds more than Cybertruck. And I mean, the tri-motor, the heaviest Cybertruck will weigh 5,000 pounds or less. The lightest F-150 will weigh 6,500 pounds. The one with the larger battery pack will weigh a minimum of 6,800 pounds. That's from Mike Levine from Ford. That's actually a tweet from an official Ford representative. They have much lower payload. So the Cybertruck has a 3,500 pound payload. The F-150, the 6,500 pound F-150 can't have more than 2,000 pounds payload, because then it would have a gross vehicle weight rating over 8,500 pounds. And that would put it in a different class and has a regulatory impact. So they have to limit it. A 6,500 pound vehicle isn't going to drive as well as a 5,000 pound vehicle. And I think, I generally think the comparable Cybertruck will probably weigh something like 4,700 pounds. So it's a really, really big difference in weight. And then the Cybertruck will have more payload. It'll be more practical because of its payload capacity. I believe it's going to be able to tow more. The towing capacity. Assuming that Tesla is able to make Cybertruck at scale, the only people who are going to buy Ford F-150 Lightnings are people who really like the look.
Right.
And don't mind paying a lot. Because the practical reality is you can buy a regular F-150, a gasoline-powered or diesel-powered F-150 for a lot less money than an F-150 Lightning.
Right.
I believe that's correct. And then the other problem is this. Will Ford lose money making the F-150 Lightning? I don't see how they make money. They make money on the F-150 because they sell 1 million of them a year, so they have their cost of R&D and design and everything, but they're able to get economies of scale on building the F-150. If you're only, in the short run, they're only going to build, 50,000 a year. They're going to try to scale to 150,000 a year. You don't get the same economies of scale. I think Ford actually loses money making the F-150 Lightning. I think they actually lose money making the Mach-E. They can use creative accounting to make it look like they're not losing money, but that means they have to forget about amortizing the R&D costs.
GM made the Bolt. They're recalling all of them. They're losing $1 billion in the recall. So, and VW, my understanding is losing $4,000 for every ID4 and ID3 that they're selling. So
only $4,000?
That's the number I saw. Maybe it's worse, but they don't break it out, so you don't know. But they kind of make it back because then they don't have to pay Tesla for the tax, the credit thing, the credit penalty. They can then swap it and sell an SUV. So that kind of game goes on. I think there may have been Ford and GM statements that they don't, and Volkswagen statements, they don't expect to make money on their EVs until like 2025, 2026. So then they have to get 150,000. They hope to be making money, but they may not. And they'll be losing money, all the time until then. And they could end up, if they don't miss their targets, if they don't do as well, they're losing money, yes. So so they can keep losing money, yes.
Well, and even like in your scenario that they come out of bankruptcy and they rebuild themselves at a lower scale, then again, they don't have economies of scale because they're not producing enough vehicles. I just think there's, I don't see how they survive. And I would say there's an interesting question. Let me put the question to you this way. Does Tesla inherently become a monopoly, or is there opportunity for someone else to survive and grow?
China car makers are pretty strong and will get a lot of, well, as we've seen, all the car makers get state support. China goes more direct at it. And then there's these really cheap cars that Tesla's not making it, but once you go 25K, then that reduces, you're down to 5K, 15K, and does Tesla go after that or not? I think there'll be pieces of the pie that the scraps that the other guys can keep that Tesla
like
won't.
what is it called? The Hongguang Mini EV?
Hongguang Mini, yeah.
That's like $4,000 or something like that?
Yeah.
So Tesla's probably not going to cut into that market for a while.
Yeah, maybe ever.
But
who
cares?
Yeah, it's just like Apple takes its 20%, they get 9% of the profit, and then they leave the scraps for everyone else. Yes, Samsung's going at it, but the other guys, their profits are way down, and Apple just doesn't care, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think unlike Apple, Tesla's and Elon are more aggressive, and will leave fewer scraps around.
Do you think we're heading to a robotaxi world? If Tesla delivers full self-driving and they open a robotaxi network,
yes,
and over time the price of a robotaxi ride gets down to the point where it costs less to ride in a robotaxi than it does to own a car, right? Because you and I own our cars, and our cars sit in the garage for 22 hours a day.
Right.
Is that a good ballpark? Maybe I'm probably more than that, honestly.
Yeah.
My car probably sits in the garage an average of 23 hours a day or more.
Yeah.
I just don't drive that much. If we head to a robotaxi world, a robotaxi is driven, let's say 18 hours a day. It's driven 9 times as much as the 2 hours a day my car is driven. It inherently costs less per mile to operate a vehicle. Operating cost per mile of a vehicle driven 18 hours a day is inherently less than the operating cost of a vehicle driven 2 hours a day.
Yep.
18 hours a day versus 2 hours a day. So that could push us to a world of robotaxis where a large percentage of the population stops buying cars. Wealthy people will buy cars because, hey, I can.
Yeah.
But the average middle-class individual is going to say, wait a minute, I can not own a car, travel more conveniently with robotaxis. There's a lot of reasons why robotaxis are actually... People think robotaxis are less convenient. They're actually more convenient, but that's a long conversation.
Yep.
Save money, never have to go get an oil change, never have to fill the gas tank, never have to change the tires, never have to change the windshield wipers. The robotaxi network takes care of all that. All I do is click on my phone and walk out the front door, and a car pulls up. In that world, Tesla's producing, let's say, 10 million cars, and they end up replacing 50 million cars, and there's almost no global car market left.
Right.
Do you see that potentially coming? And if that comes, what's really left for anyone else?
So I think it's a longer transition because of the stickiness of people, older people not willing to change, and still want their cars, even though it's not purely economic in terms of the ride and that kind of stuff. You can see that in places like Singapore, New York, and that kind of thing, where you have a highly efficient public transit system. Rich people, poor people.
Wait, have you been to New York City?
Yeah, I was just there just a little while ago.
I would not call that a highly efficient public transit system.
Go for the Hong Kong or the Singapore or something like that. You can have there are places with highly efficient public transit systems, and they've also in Singapore they jack up the price of owning a car because of the fees and dues, so you end up paying 3 times as much for the car, and still people have cars.
But a much lower share of the population has a
much lower share, right? Much lower share.
That's my point. Is that it doesn't have to be that 100% of the people stop owning cars.
Yeah.
But I think, it's hard. So I'm not poor, right? I'm relatively wealthy.
Yeah.
Even by for those who are not in America, Americans tend to be wealthier than the rest of the world, with some exceptions. I'm probably 90th or 95th percentile, maybe 90th percentile American in terms of my wealth.
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd measure that. I have basically zero debt. And I have assets, so that puts me ahead of like 75% of the country right there. If 60% stop buying cars, that's a death blow,
right?
Right, to the entire car industry.
Like I said, it's not a death blow, but yeah, they're crippled for sure. They're crippled for sure. They shrink so much. There's such a shell, just like Nokia is still around, BlackBerry is still around, even though they lost, they're a shadow of what they were, right?
But it's impossible for them to operate with economies of scale when they're not producing enough cars.
Yes.
They would have to identify, here's an example, like let's say a niche market, recreational vehicles, like motorhomes.
Yep.
Maybe that's a market that Tesla doesn't get to for a while.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe that becomes a more popular, I actually think, by the way, I think that's a huge opportunity for Tesla.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. It's not a huge opportunity because I don't think the market's that big. But if Tesla made a cargo van, like on a Cybertruck platform, and they offered an RV version of it, that would sell like hotcakes.
Yeah.
And if they made a semi, if they made a Class A motorhome based on semi, like a Class B motorhome based on Cybertruck and a Class A motorhome based on semi, the sales would just be off. They would basically obliterate everybody else in the market. But the volume of that might not be enough for Tesla to bother.
Well, the thing is, especially if you have a changed world where you have self-driving, then the motorhome becomes this whole new thing because you never need to stop. You can be always on the go. Like I've seen some things where it's like, this box that is a mobile office kind of thing. So you're in there working. Yeah,
you don't even have to stop for a bathroom break because the RV has a bathroom in it.
That's right. And then you have an office in there, so you're Wi-Fiing and connected to Starlink and whatever. And so you're living in it. You never own. Just like people went from from landlines to cellular phones. You may not have a land house because I'm always
you stop living in a house.
Stop living in a house. Right. Yeah. So these new markets can emerge, and then that gives something in terms of like the custom detailer, the guy who is adding the interiors and doing stuff. So is not necessarily huge. Well, it could become a pretty big market. So just like when the Japanese came in and took away a lot of the regular passenger cars, sedans and stuff like that, and then the minivan and SUV thing got created in the U.S., which the Japanese took a while to figure out. Then they got the minivan, but they didn't get the pickup truck and stuff as well. That there could be some things that are created. But the thing is, again, because the competitor is Tesla, and Elon will understand the vagaries of the U.S. market as well or better than the traditional guys. Because he's a stronger competitor, there's less chance that he takes his foot off their throat, right? That he'll, wherever they turn, he's there, right?
I mean, I could see like Elon says, we're not going to make a convertible.
Yeah.
Right. So there's an opportunity for somebody who wants to make convertibles. That's a market that opportunity will still be available.
Right.
But I mean, I literally look at it and I say, okay, what are the top selling cars? You have this thing you sent me from California, Toyota Camry, Toyota RAV4, Toyota Highlander. There's some particularly big selling vehicles. Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla. The Battery Day vehicle is going to take on the Civic and the Corolla. Model 3 takes on Camry and Accord. Model Y takes on RAV4, CRV, Highlander, Explorer. And Model X comes in on the luxury level. And I actually think there's potential for Model S and Model X to get price cuts. Once they're producing at serious scale, I could see like a $60,000 Model S with a lithium iron phosphate battery pack. Getting 350 miles of range. I could see a Model X coming down to compete with, the high-end Lexus SUVs.
And the thing is, something in that document is that Tesla is utterly dominating their category. Near luxury vehicle for the Model 3 or the luxury small SUV. In California, which I think is the precursor, foreshadowing in the higher volume that Tesla will have, in a year or two in other places, they're selling at 4 or 5 times the number 2 in that category. So they're utterly crushing Lexus, BMW in that category.
Let me just go with that. So you sent me the California Auto Outlook from Q2 of 2021. And it shows that the Tesla Model 3 and the near luxury segment of the market, the Tesla Model 3 sold 19,746 cars in the quarter. The next competitor was the BMW 3 Series at 6,000. So they literally sold more than triple the BMW 3 Series. Was that in
2020 or that 2021? Because they show 2020 and then 2021 beside it.
Year to date, 2021 through June.
Okay.
That's the first half of 2021. They sold triple the number of vehicles the BMW 3 Series. They sold more. Model 3 sold more than any sedan, any midsize or above sedan other than the Camry and the Accord.
Right.
And then, the Civic and the Corolla sold more. And, keep in mind, like, we don't know, for all we know, that they're going to sell more Model 3s in California the second half of the year. But it's not that Tesla is selling less cars because they don't have the demand. It's that they don't make enough.
Right.
As they make more cars. Like, if you go on, like I went on I was thinking I actually have a new theory about what I might do to with a Tesla for my channel, and that it involves me buying a Tesla. So I was shopping for like Model 3s, Model Ys. I don't know if you know, I have an order for a Model X Plaid, which I can't afford, but I might buy it anyway. That's a long conversation. That won't come till April, so it's like, well, maybe I'll buy a Model 3 now for this purpose that I have in mind. I have a friend who's going to let me borrow his Model Y for the same purpose. Videos for my channel. And I went on the Tesla website to try to find, and you know, like, I think if you buy a performance Model 3, you can get it in a little over a month. Or a performance Model Y. If you try to buy a long-range Model 3 or a long-range Model Y, it's like January. Right? You're waiting a long time for it. I think the standard range plus you can get in November, the Model 3. So, and then if you go to like cars.com or Carvana, it's like, you can search for Teslas and you'll see them, and then when you click on it, you'll see there's already a pending transaction. Like there's almost, other than certain like standard range plus Model 3s, right? The demand for the long-range Model 3s and the long-range Model Ys is off the charts.
Right.
And they literally can't keep them in stock. So it's not like there's a demand problem. So it's just a question of them ramping production. And everything I see, they're going to ramp production in Texas and Berlin, you know, starting end of this year, but really into 2023. And the volume is just going to go off the charts. And they're going to cut into Camry. They're going to cut into Accord. They're going to cut into the E-Class Mercedes, the C-Class Mercedes. They're going to cut into all these sales. And then you get on the SUV land, and you mentioned these numbers. Model Y sold 27,398 vehicles in the first half of 2021. The next competitor in the luxury compact SUV was the Lexus NX, under 7,000. The Lexus RX, or the midsize SUV, which I think Tesla Model Y is a pretty close competitor to Lexus RX. I don't know why it's put in the smaller segment. That sold just under 10,000. So they sold nearly triple what the Lexus RX sold. Right. You know, and then, you know, and the only reason they're not selling more is because they don't make enough. Right. So what we're looking at is in really next year.
Yes, next year.
They're going to demolish this market.
Yeah, luxury compact and luxury midsize. Yeah.
No, but it's broader than that, because you take the midsize SUVs like the Toyota Highlander, which sold they sold more Model Ys than Toyota sold Highlanders, right? Yes. Which is I think a significantly less expensive and very convenient and practical SUV. So they're going to take on Highlander sales. They might take out some Toyota RAV4 sales and some Honda CR-V sales. This is a bomb to a large segment of the car market. You know, and then if Cybertruck comes out and they drop a bomb on the Chevy Silverado, the Ford F-Series, the Ram pickup, the GMC Sierra, the Toyota Tacoma. I guess they don't have a minivan yet, right?
Yeah, but I think it'll be soon. Yeah, I think they'll, after they ramp Cybertruck, then just like the delay between Model 3 to Model Y, it'll be the delay from Cybertruck to Cybervan.
Right. Well, I think there might be a Cybervan, and I think there also might be the 2023 vehicle, the Battery Day vehicle. I think is actually not one vehicle. I think Battery Day vehicle is a platform. Yes. And the Battery Day vehicle will be a compact, like a hatchback in Europe, and it'll be a minivan in the United States, and it'll be, you know, an SUV in China. Who knows? It's going to be a variety of things.
What did you think of the rumors of the $25,000 China car by the end of the year, like being shown?
I don't believe it.
I don't believe it.
No, I don't think it matters. First of all, I don't think timing matters that much. I don't think it matters. You know, if there's a shortage of chips, if the supply chain is chip constrained, then you don't want to make lower margin vehicles. Right. You want to make higher margin vehicles. If you're selling every Model Y you can make and you're making a high margin on it, why would you bother making that little vehicle? And if I was going to devote my resources to producing the next vehicle, it wouldn't be a $25,000 hatchback in China. It would be Cybertruck. Right. Because the scale of how many Cybertrucks you're going to... I mean, this is just in California, which is not, I don't think, necessarily the biggest pickup market. It's, you know, Texas might be a bigger pickup market. The first half of the year, I'm counting ballpark 100,000 full-size pickups in just California. I think it's 1 million. Just F-150 is 1 million a year. And if you figure Chevy Silverado, Ram pickup, you're probably talking a market of 2+ million a year vehicles, maybe 2.5 million, 3 million a year of these full-size pickups. Yeah. You can easily sell 1 million a year. of the Cybertruck.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't think they can produce 1 million a year, but they produce 500,000. Why would you? And that's potentially a much higher margin vehicle. So
my theory on it is that they make something like a Model Y shaved off. The way you have like a RDX versus Acura RDX versus a Acura MDX kind of thing, where you take off the back end, right? And then if they can make it cheaper by, $7,000, something like that, then basically maintain the margin, but just take out the cost of it, so that you are dropping down a bit in class, so that they can. Because in China, it seems that there's this fairly competitive thing with these cheaper $25,000 cars.
you think? Wait. Do you think the $25,000 car that's been rumored is going to be based on the Model 3 or the Model Y?
I think Model Y.
Well, but the Model Y is larger and costs more than the Model 3. Well,
okay, so maybe it's Model 3 then. The Model 3, but shaving off the back end or something like that, like just easily, keeping again the most common parts and that kind of thing, and then just making this reduced size thing that shaves off costs.
The hatchback concept, like the Volkswagen Golf, is very popular in Europe. So if they made a car like that in China, they could also export it to Europe.
Right.
So I don't think it would sell here.
Yeah. But so it'd be for the China Euro markets where they want something that parks better and that kind of stuff.
But let's be clear about this. I don't think you're saying that vehicle is the battery day vehicle, right?
It's kind of this hybrid thing where basically they use it in order to shave off, to address demands of the market, and then it'd probably be like a $30,000 vehicle. Like they wouldn't, again, like you say, why would they go super cheap when they don't have to, when they're constrained? So then they would just do it like however much cost we can take out, say $5,000. Then we drop the price down $5,000. If we take out $8,000, we drop it $8,000, but we keep our margins nice.
Okay, so let me just take this on. There's a vehicle that they proposed that they talked about at Battery Day.
Yeah.
Or a platform, whether it's a vehicle or a platform.
Yeah.
The amount of the engineering resources that would be required to come up with this $25,000 hatchback vehicle are engineering resources that could go into the Battery Day vehicle. Yeah. And the Battery Day vehicle is ultimately going to outcompete this vehicle that you're talking about. So why put engineering resources to producing a vehicle that's going to be obsolete in 2 years? I just don't think it doesn't make sense to me that they're going to do that.
Okay.
And I'm not saying they won't do it. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't seem like the right strategy if I was running Tesla. And, usually they tell you ahead of time, here's a model that we're going to be producing in next year. Mm-hmm. And there hasn't been any hint. There hasn't been any reveal. So I don't want to say it's impossible, but, given that they're already producing Model 3s and Model Ys at scale and they sell every one they make, and I would rather make more Model 3s and Model Ys than come up with a new vehicle. Until you saturated the market for Model 3 and Model Y, what's the point of making this little vehicle, especially when you have this future vehicle coming? If you remember Elon Musk in his interview with Sandy Munro.
That's right.
I mean, at some point we'll probably switch to single piece casting. I think we need to get the Texas factory and the Berlin factory going, but it's just we just need basically an opportunity to kind of redo the factory without blowing up the cash flow of the company.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of asked him about the next generation factory, and Elon said, we're not talking about that until we start ramping Giga Texas and Giga Berlin. So I think we're going to see middle of 2022, ballpark, could be second quarter, third quarter. I think Tesla's going to announce the Battery Day vehicle. And it's not really about the vehicle, it's really about the factory.
Kind of redo the factory.
Mm-hmm. That the real innovation in the Battery Day vehicle, the Battery Day vehicle is going to be designed to be manufactured more efficiently at lower cost. That it's going to have 48-volt wiring. It's going to have larger single-piece castings. It may be single-piece casting for the whole vehicle. I think it's tough to get there, but I think that's where they might want to go. It's going to have structural battery pack with lithium iron phosphate only battery cells, right? And it's going to be the next generation FSD hardware, the next generation FSD cameras, and maybe it won't have a steering wheel and pedals. Mm-hmm. Maybe it will be that advanced. I think there's a question about, Or maybe it'll be built so that it's easier to delete the steering wheel and pedals. Like it'll be drive-by-wire.
Yeah.
Right? I see that coming. And to me, it makes absolute sense. And the point is that when that vehicle comes out and they start producing that in volume, so like the current factories, the Ys, the 3s, the S's and the X's and Cybertruck that we know about, that maybe adds up to 5-6 million vehicles a year. Maybe they'll end up making more Cybertrucks, they'll put some more lines down, whatever. But they probably not getting much over 6 million vehicles a year on those. But when they come out with this next vehicle, I think they make 12 million of those a year or more.
Right.
I think that each factory produces at least 2 million and maybe 3 million a year.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 million a year. And maybe they just have one of these factories in Berlin, one of these factories in Shanghai, one of them in Texas. Maybe they put a factory in South Carolina. They put a factory, probably not in California. One in Texas, one in South Carolina to serve the whole country, right? Let me ask you this question. So Volkswagen's first.
Yeah.
Volkswagen is most likely to not succeed.
Yes.
We voted them not most likely to not succeed. Who's next after Volkswagen?
BMW hangs on, even though they are weak in line. So then could be Ford or GM. I might talk about getting in trouble, having to get bailed out.
Yeah.
As opposed to dying. Yeah.
So Ford or GM are pretty vulnerable. I would say Toyota's pretty vulnerable. I would say actually, to me, the most likely to not fail is Hyundai. I think Hyundai it's easier for them to make lower cost cars to compete in like the lower end segments of the market. Like, let me just look at like subcompact or compact vehicles. Well, they're not the biggest sellers in California, at least.
Right.
They're sort of towards the bottom. But
they have the Elantra in compact.
The Elantra is fifth after Civic, Corolla, Prius, Sentra, and the Sonata is well behind Camry, Accord, Altima, and Optima. Oh, Kia Optima. So maybe in the mid-size segment, when you add Kia Optima and Hyundai Sonata, aren't they the same company? Kia and Hyundai? I think they're the same company. So
they're still South Korea Inc.
So they're really together. That's like the number 3 in the mid-size market. And Hyundai Elantra. Oh, this Kia Rio is the subcompact. But those are pretty low volume.
Yep.
But Hyundai has its own sort of protected Korean market, which probably doesn't let a lot of Teslas in. I mean, I think this is the other tricky thing is you've got all these countries that have said we're pro EV.
Yes.
Right. And then when Tesla wants to sell the best EVs in the world, are they going to shut them out? Right. China has let Tesla in. I think Tesla builds a Japan gigafactory. Like I could see an Osaka gigafactory for the 2020 the battery day vehicle, supplied with batteries by Panasonic, right? So they're giving Panasonic business, so that's an entry into the Japanese market. So
we're going to see how much European protectionism there is when we have Berlin, making say 500,000 cars next year. That will really tell. And the thing is, not only does it get rid of the European, I think $10,000 fee for importing a car, something like that. But it also gets rid of like $1,000, $2,000 to ship the car from China or the United States. So that's a substantial cut.
Well, it's not really protectionism if it's a German factory.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's a German factory. It's employing German workers. Who do you think is most likely to survive without needing to be bailed out?
Is Porsche owned by VW?
I believe it is.
And you bought them. So then the pieces of it spin off. Who else is a high brand loyalty?
Well, could they spin off Porsche in a bankruptcy, or would they have to spin it off before? And would the bankruptcy process let them get away with that?
Maybe they have to do it just before, something like that. But then they spin off the pieces, or they'd sell it. It's part of the deal that they sell it out to someone else and someone else buys it. I think there's these highly loyal vehicles where people don't care about any efficiency, any whatever.
Ferrari.
But
there's such a small volume.
Small volume, right?
I mean, I suppose the Mercedes G-Class, that big ugly wagon, a big ugly SUV. And
then, I think some of the Chinese makers, BYD, maybe they do okay in the China market. China market being semi-protected and that kind of thing. But China, Tesla's already there, but they're able to compete at that level. In terms of the European ones or the U.S. ones, again, the European ones, U.S. European ones and the Japanese ones are not that healthy companies to begin with. So, and then Toyota could have been, but then they have been in such denial and just stuck with their hybrids and not going the EV route. People keep talking about them coming in, but they've been hiding it very, very well, anything they're going to do. So, yeah, last to get bailed out.
I think it might be Hyundai.
Yeah.
Because they've got a protected market in their home market. And, I think the other theory is, okay, let's suppose Tesla starts taking a lot of market share. Who has the most customer loyalty that retains their market share the longest? And I think BMW might be a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the BMW buyer is buying them as and then there's sort of Mercedes, right? I mean, I can see your point. If Porsche was spun up, Porsche seems to be one of the most innovative in EVs. And
right.
I'm not that familiar. There's the Hyundai Ioniq or Ioniq 5 or whatever. I don't know how good. My own gut is that any other EV is probably not competitive with a Tesla. That they're sort of trying to be competitive with Tesla, but they're not really competitive with Tesla. The Taycan is a pretty hot sports car, but it doesn't really compete with a Tesla Model S on a racetrack. I mean, it's close, but it doesn't have the range. So I could see that Porsche Taycan might continue to hold sales. I know I don't know if you know Abe. We've been talking to Abe a lot. He says Porsche's coming out with a Macan, which is an SUV.
Subaru does pretty well. They are kind of a quirky kind of company, and they have a bunch of things that don't seem to be early targets of Tesla. They got their SUVs, the Subaru Crosstrek thing. They got Forester. Got some quirky cars.
I would agree with you, except that I think Subaru owners tend to be more environmentally inclined. So they're probably more likely if Tesla. Look, I think the Model Y is all-wheel drive. I don't know how well the Model Y does in snow. I suspect it does about as well as a Subaru. As long as you put the right tires on it. So I would think that Subaru buyers would be more likely to switch because they're environmentally conscious. Where Ford, pickup truck owners are not necessarily environmentally conscious, right?
But if you have a place like California where they got like two cars, so they buy their driving vehicle, and then they have their vehicle for other activities, which is the Subaru thing when they're driving out into the woods or doing something, right? Then they would be environmentally conscious and have two. Just like some environmentally conscious people can have a regular house and they can have their cabin, even though they're environmentally conscious.
I could see that argument for like the Jeep Wrangler.
Yeah.
Right. The Jeep Wrangler is a good off-road vehicle. I don't know if Subarus are so much off-road as they are winter. I'm from up north. I'm from New York State, upstate New York. And there's a lot of Subarus in like Vermont and New Hampshire and upstate New York because they have brutal winters with a lot of snow and ice, and you want a vehicle that can get around. And Subarus definitely have a reputation for being good in the snow. I had an Audi A4, Quattro, and that was very, very good in the snow. But my hunch is that if you put winter tires on a Model Y or a Model 3, it's pretty good in the snow. I wonder if ground clearance is an issue, that they're kind of, in heavy snow, you want to be off the ground more.
Right. So
the Jeep Wrangler is probably better about that. Some of the Subarus are probably better about that. The Outback. You sent me these numbers from the California Outlook thing, and you said that it showed that a lot of brands had big increases during the first half of 2021. That Porsche went up a lot. Tesla, of course, went up.
Because they were comparing against COVID 2020.
Yeah.
Right. So they're comparing it. So yes, they went up because they were also badly hit in Q2. So if you can also look at their Q1 outlook, which Q1 may not have been quite that badly hit, or you can look at the 2020 Q4, right? But because they're doing it year by same quarter last year to same quarter this year, it's recovering from the worst of the COVID downturn in 2020. And so then, they, against Q1 to Q1 or the previous quarter, Q4, then, you could see more shrinkage because we've had some weird quarters because of COVID.
They're spinning it as a big growth because the first half of 2020 was terrible.
Right.
Because everyone was terrified of COVID. Well, let me ask you this. Of the upstarts, let's leave out China for a second. Let's talk about American startups.
Yeah.
Do you see any American startups that look like they might be competitive with their EVs?
Until they get up to, a few, at least, 5,000 a year or something like that, you don't know that they can actually execute, right? I think you make that point for Lucid and for whatever, right? Until they're actually making cars and doing something, just like Tesla went through its production hell and almost bought it, trying to make Model 3. You can have a nice car, but then if you can't make it, then you're done. That's the difference between, like the Neo and blah, blah, blah. So they've actually gotten to some reasonable scale.
Neo has, just for the people who don't know, Neo Global is a Chinese car EV maker that has made more than 100,000 cars now. And BYD is a Chinese, almost like a conglomerate that makes batteries. They make gasoline and diesel powered vehicles, but they make a lot of electric buses, and they have some electric cars that they're making.
Yeah, so they make ICE, they make hybrid, and they make electric.
And they appear,
of the electrics, they have 160,000.
So
they're a little bit bigger than the Neo in electric.
They appear to be. We'll talk about the Chinese companies in a minute. I just want to go back. Let's say like Rivian. Rivian has a fairly innovative pickup truck design.
Yes.
If they can execute, do you think they potentially thrive in the market that's coming, or does Cybertruck obliterate them?
I think they thrive in the market coming. Didn't they get like massive investment from, I forget, GM or
Amazon? Amazon, I think Ford.
Amazon.
I think it was Amazon and Ford. No, they have money. They have money. The question is still whether they can execute. But supposing they can execute, I don't know how familiar you are with the Rivian. You decided to buy a Cybertruck. I've ordered a Cybertruck. Do you think that the Rivian looks
more like looks more like a regular truck? So then it's the people who can't handle going to something different, and then if they get more merged in with Ford or whatever, then if that's working, and they have a second bet in case F-150 Lightning has issues or something like that, that they get a lot of support. Again, so long as they can execute that they.
No, what I mean is, as a consumer, do you think there are? Because when I look at Rivian, I say these guys are going for the off-roader market.
Yeah.
Right. That's what they're going for. They're going for the off-roader market, and the off-roader market is It's small, but it's they know what they want. Now, I think Cybertruck is actually going for the off-roader market as well, but and Rivian is more expensive than Cybertruck from everything I can see. But maybe they survive. Maybe they're a niche player that they can survive. What do you think about? You know what I think about Lucid. What do you think about Lucid?
I think they have to make vehicles. They did finally a test drive. Next year is the year, right? They delayed making stuff like, Fisker, all these guys, they talk about a big game, and then they make some prototypes, and then they disappear. So until they're making national vehicles, I can't believe that they'll
let me go with this. Let's suppose they actually execute and produce vehicles. Of course, I don't know if you've seen their slide deck for the slide deck they had for their original announcement and the SPAC merger. The SPAC merger slide deck.
Yeah, they
have projected that, let's say 2025, I think it is, they're going to sell 100,000 vehicles with an average selling price of $100,000.
So they're going to replicate Model S success.
It's the Lucid Air and the Gravity together that they're going to sell 100,000 vehicles. Now, with an average selling price of $100,000, Model S and Model X did not have an average selling price of $100,000.
Right.
Right now they do.
Yeah.
But historically there were $70,000, $80,000.
Yeah.
I think would probably be maybe it was 90, but it wasn't 100. And I don't know that the market is big enough. Assuming Tesla's going to continue to grow their sales of Model S and Model X, Lucid is making this ultimately like they've got a $160,000 vehicle, right? And I don't think they have the orders. I think that's another challenge. But I'm just wondering, supposing they actually succeed in making a 500-mile range vehicle for $120,000, how many of those do you think they can sell?
So I think that the competitors, like Tesla has got to 70-80% U.S. market share, and in the category against ICE vehicles, they got to 40% market share. So they got 78% market share for EVs. So there is pieces of 20%, 30% for someone else to really do, if they can get half of that market because they're really the really clear number two, right?
Yeah.
They can get enough to survive, particularly for and then for the high end vehicle market, if they position a bit more luxury somehow, there's ways that they can get decent share. If you have 120,000, 150,000 SNX selling per year, then a solid number two can get to 50,000.
Right, but their target is 100,000. Here's the problem that I see. Does a consumer look at the Lucid Air as a competitor to the Mercedes S-Class, which they've kind of pitched it as early, or do they view it as a competitor to the Tesla Model S? And if they view it as a competitor to the Tesla Model S, and they say, okay, it's more luxurious, but Model S long range right now is $90,000.
Yep.
They could sell the Model S long range in the long run for $70,000.
Right.
And get 400 miles of range. And are you going to pay $120,000 for a vehicle with 500 miles of range when you can get a Model S that performs probably better for $70,000? Anyway, so I think that's a challenge. Let's talk about who's another U.S. market competitor that might U.S. market startup. I mean, Fisker, I don't think I don't think we should bother talking about Fisker until they actually do something beyond talk.
Right.
Is there anyone else in the United States that's a significant startup that has a shot? I mean, I think Lordstown's done, right? Nicola's done, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Who's left? Who else is there?
Well, there's because of the delays with the Tesla Semi, there's several EV, I think, there's some EV semi makers, or are they only doing the workhorse? I think they try to do some electric utility vehicles. So there's guys who are making stuff that is way down the list of what Tesla's going to do, right? So they're not going directly against Tesla.
I think cargo. I actually think the strategy of doing like cargo van.
Yeah.
Like if you could get a cargo van out on the road in 2022.
Yeah.
An EV cargo van.
Yeah.
Tesla's not there yet. Tesla's not going to be there for a few years. There's potential to establish yourself in that market.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like anybody's really, I think Workhorse is sort of doing, but what I saw of Workhorse, they didn't really look like they had good specs.
Yeah.
So let's turn to the Chinese companies. So we've got Neo Global.
Yep.
They produced over 100,000 vehicles. They've shown they can actually produce vehicles. We don't know how much state support they're getting, but we're sure they're getting some. I don't know enough about their vehicles. Are they pretty good? Are they competitive? I think they're pretty good.
I think they're pretty good and pretty competitive. Yes. Yeah. And they have a higher luxury end, and they Neo tries to do a lifestyle thing where they have where they try to sell luxury products all around, where they try and join their lifestyle clubs, high end, cigar smoking clubs, whatever like that, So they have this high end lifestyle thing. So they have the cars, and they have this other stuff around it. And then there's Xpeng, there's UID we talked about.
But let's stick with Neo for a second. One of the things that Neo has done, and Neo fans hate me for this, I think the battery swap idea is dumb.
Yeah,
I think it's just fundamentally dumb.
I heard that they make the case that because of the peculiarities of doing stuff in China, that somehow the battery swap thing makes more sense in China. That because for some reason, supercharging, whatever the issues are. I'm looking at it deeply. I just remember seeing that case that it makes more sense in China because of how,
okay, but in a battery constrained world, you have to have more batteries.
Yes, I agree that they have to have more batteries.
And then my take on it is when I look at the battery swap station that they have set up, the cost of building that battery swap station has to be more than the cost of, say, 20 superchargers.
Yeah.
Right. And although the battery swap station charges faster than a supercharger, its throughput is lower than 20 superchargers. Its throughput is probably lower than 10 superchargers.
Yeah.
So now maybe there's space constraints. And one of the arguments I've heard was, well, people in China live in apartments and they have difficulty finding charging. Well, how hard is it for a parking garage company to start wiring parking spots and charging extra for those spots?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that's really hard to do.
I think it eventually goes away that China does some big infrastructure build, it's that their thing, where the state makes, massive amounts of charging stations. then
Yep.
this whole diversion of the swapping goes away and it becomes a non-issue.
Well,
Because-
they could subsidize the battery swap stations too, I suppose.
Yeah, they could do that too.
Let's turn to BYD. One of the things you mentioned about NIO selling this sort of luxury lifestyle thing. Doesn't BYD have sort of a reputation of being cheap?
Right. So
they can't do the luxury lifestyle thing.
Right. So they came out like 1995. They did, especially with Warren Buffett popping into them, they got the early EV leader in China. Then when the Shanghai factory opened, they took a big hit in that. I think it was 2018, 2019. They took a hit, and now they're rebuilding. They had their previous vehicles were no good, and now they're relaunching with the Han and something like that, which is now more competitive. And so they're rebuilding, but then I think they only increased like 12%, something like that. So they haven't reached great volumes as much as a particular Tesla troll, likes to say that they have. So
Taylor Hogan. Sorry.
yeah. And you talk to him. So basically, I see, but they are doing a lot of things right, and we'll see where they end up.
I mean, their Blade battery pack idea looks cool. I don't know functionally whether it's actually good engineering, but it looks like it's good engineering. I don't know. For those who don't know, BYD has if you Google BYD Blade battery, you'll see that they have this claim that they have this energy battery technology that is an advanced way of doing a battery pack. I'm not convinced, but at least they're trying to innovate. So XPeng, I don't know much about. Tell me about XPeng.
I unfortunately do not know as much about XPeng either, other than the fact that in the last quarter, I think that each of XPeng, Li Auto, and NIO all got about the same number of volume. So whatever they had to do to get to that quarterly volume number, I think there's XPeng still losing money. They just had their recent quarterly thing, but they're losing more money, but they had more sales growth. So they're basically, getting big and losing money in order to get there.
Okay. So last thing I want to ask you about is my insane startup, which I actually just invested more money in today.
Mm-hmm.
I have decided I'm going to build a single passenger EV designed for self-driving.
Yep.
My theory is that what Tesla is doing is they're accelerating the transition to sustainable energy and sustainable transportation, and they're starting with rich people in rich countries, and they're working their way down to upper middle class people in rich countries and middle class people in rich countries. And I actually spoke with a couple of people at Tesla, a couple of highly placed people at Tesla, and as far as I know, reaching very poor people in poor countries or even middle class people in poor countries is not on the roadmap anytime soon. I don't think. I mean, maybe a minibus. So I have this idea for a single passenger EV that would be very, very inexpensive to build, last a long time, have a low cost of operation, and be able to take one person at very low cost. On Autonomy Day, Elon said that the Model 3 was down around 18 cents a mile at the time.
Yep.
I think if Tesla gets to the million-mile vehicle and they achieve a little bit other efficiencies, Model 3s and Model Ys get down close to 10 cents a mile operating cost.
Yep.
Okay. I think the battery day vehicle probably gets down to 7 cents a mile, maybe 5 cents a mile operating cost. I'm talking about amortizing the vehicle over the life of the vehicle. I'm talking about energy costs, replacing tires, windshield wipers. You throw everything in, insurance. You end up in the ballpark of it's somewhere between 5 and 10 cents a mile. And I think the vehicle that I have in mind, I think I can get to the point where that vehicle can operate at a penny a mile. It's hard for us to grasp when you have money.
Yep.
And I actually do not see this vehicle operating on U.S. roads. It's not designed to be safe on U.S. roads. It would be safer than a motorcycle, right? But it's not going to meet U.S. safety standards for a vehicle that operates on the roads, unless the safety standards change. Literally, in order to make this vehicle that inexpensively, it can't meet safety standards.
Okay.
But it seems to me likely that I would be able to find markets in some poor countries to say, hey, I've got this vehicle that is self-driving. And my example that I'd like to use is the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic, which is most famous in the United States for producing great shortstops, great baseball players. But is not as well known for the fact that it has one of the highest traffic fatality rates in the world. And I think it's largely because there's a lot of drunk drivers hitting a lot of pedestrians.
Right.
And if you can offer a solution for people in poor countries that have that problem, it's not just the Dominican Republic, right? That's a problem across the Caribbean and other countries as well.
Right.
If you can offer a solution where, hey, instead of you driving your car to go drinking, you can hop in this single passenger EV and it will cost you basically nothing. And you can get a ride to the bar and take a ride home, and it can be good for commuting and all that. And they're going to have self-driving software. The idea is to build the vehicle for self-driving software that will exist by the time I'm ready for production.
Right.
Like I'll be ready for production in 3 or 4 years. And by that time, there should be a good solution that's reasonably priced. Like I expect Tesla's solution might be too expensive. I mean, maybe I could talk Tesla into licensing to me for less, but that would be my dream, would be the Tesla FSD. But maybe there's some competing FSD from China or Comma.ai or something that I can put on my little vehicle and operate in a poorer country and deliver rides for a nickel a mile.
Yep.
Right? Where I think the Tesla robotaxi network won't get down to 25 cents a mile for maybe 10 years.
Right. I think it's a solid idea. So I have experience in the 90s, mid-90s. I was in Taipei for 8 months.
Taipei is the capital of Taiwan for people who don't know.
Taiwan, yes. And back then, it was all motor scooters. Basically they had a rule that you couldn't go, I think, over 150 cc or something like that. So basically like a moped, but they try to make them look like motorcycles. And basically they're driving everywhere. They're driving on the sidewalk. The traffic is, they ignore the lines, and basically it's flowing, all this stuff. There's a massive concentration. They've since gone to, full-size cars because they've gone upscale in wealth. And then in the Philippines, in Manila, back then they had a lot of jeepneys, which were.
This is like a rickshaw or tuk-tuk?
It's like a stretched out Jeep, that's the name jeepney, and they would be made out of metal, so they make them themselves. So they get the engine from someplace, and then they make the shell of it themselves. So they're all these manually produced vehicles, and then the jeepneys would have a run where basically they would go like a bus, but it was like a private bus system, right? So then people were poor, so they would basically have people hanging on to them. The way you'd have people hanging onto a cable car in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But if you had a jeepney accident, one jeepney runs into another jeepney, 60 people die. You have this kind of vehicle in Africa and other places. So they have the jeepney market, the kind of like where people, if you have this cheap half cent or whatever, half buck per mile or per trip thing. And then you have the moped dominated markets in Asia, in Africa, in South America. So the lower end markets have variations on those two models.
Right.
And then you're saying we can make it safer and as cheap and cheaper than
and more convenient. This is the thing, when you talk about the jeepney thing, that becomes very inconvenient because it's not coming to your door. Right. You have to walk somewhere or somehow get to the point where the jeepney's picking up.
Right.
And I mean, I think that Tesla is going to have a minibus solution in the future. Right. And that minibus solution is probably going to be competitive in poorer countries because, like I said, the Model 3 is like 10 cents. The Model 3, Model Y are going to get down to around 10 cents a mile. Now imagine a Cybertruck-based vehicle that seats 20 people in the U.S. and in poorer countries they'll seat 30.
Right.
Right. So if it costs 30 cents a mile to operate this vehicle, but you have 30 people in it, then the cost per passenger mile is a penny a mile.
Right.
And you're able to charge competitive with my price for my vehicle, but it's not convenient because you have to get picked up somewhere. It's probably not going to be as convenient as my vehicle.
Right.
And you're going to be crammed in with 29 other people as opposed to my vehicle where you're riding alone. So, and the way I like to explain this to people is like, wealthy Westerners, like let's suppose I was going on a 100-mile trip and I could ride in the back of a Tesla Model 3 for $25, or I could ride in a tiny single passenger vehicle that feels a lot less safe and rides a lot less comfortably for $5. Right? I'm going to take the Model 3. I'm going to spend the extra $20.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people in America who might save the $20, but the vast majority of Americans are going to say, wait, I can afford the $25 for this ride, and I don't feel safe in that thing, or that thing doesn't look as comfortable to me, or whatever. But in India, if I can save you $20, there's a lot of people in India who like $20. That's a huge difference to me.
Right.
You know, so that's why I think it's potential. All right, let me ask you about one other crazy idea. Unless you have any other thoughts about my single passenger EV. Oh, let me tell you the business. Let me tell you the business plan. The business plan right now is, I paid someone to do a design. You know, like a sort of like the beginnings of a computer-aided design drawing of what it would look like, and I wasn't satisfied with his design. He didn't really do what I said. So I've just hired through Upwork 3 different people to do independently to do different designs. So I can now choose, and it's costing me about as much as I paid the first guy to hire 3 people. So I get a look at like 3 different takes on how to do this. And ultimately I have a computer-aided design, and then I build the plan is to build an alpha prototype. The alpha prototype is not meant to be representative of the future vehicle. It's meant to look like the future vehicle to some extent. But, you know, we'll probably cap the speed at 15 miles an hour. We'll get a feel for what it feels like to sit inside.
Yep.
Right. We'll probably be able to get a beginning of idea of, all right, how much range are we gonna be able to get out of this thing?
Yep.
But ultimately, once the alpha prototype is working, then hopefully I continue self-funding and pay for some real engineering to say, all right, how can we really optimize this design? Right.
One other option in terms of people, I know, you know, I'm in Silicon Valley, and there's a company called People Connect. So basically, they get, you know, you do a pitch to them to get angel funding, but they also can get engineers to say, okay, yes, I will work. I'm excited to be a startup. I will work for 3 months, 6 months for free for shares, right? In order to, so then you get perhaps a higher caliber of participation talent.
Yeah.
In exchange, you know, you give away.
Well, no. So the thinking is that on this, after the alpha prototype, which is just to get, I just want to get something that moves.
Yes.
Right. Something that looks vaguely the part. So if I decide to go crowdfunding at that, because the plan is to do crowdfunding at some point. But if I'm able to demonstrate something that moves and, you know, make a video showing it, then my hope is that I'm able to self-fund the second round of doing a beta prototype where I actually pay engineers, you know, I spend real money, right? The alpha prototype, I'm hoping to spend, let's say, $20,000 building the alpha prototype. The second round, I'm probably going to spend $50,000 or $100,000, if not more, on the engineering of the beta prototype, which is still not the full vehicle, right? But this is my thinking, like I'm trying to get to production in 3 or 4 years. I can do an alpha prototype, you know, by early to mid 2022, then do the engineering for a beta prototype, and then maybe by 2024 I'm at the point where I'm engineering, and you know, after the beta prototype, then I'm either crowdfunding or hopefully Tesla stock keeps going up and I can continue self-funding. my strategy is the more Tesla stock goes up, the more I can self-fund. You all right?
Yeah, sorry, I just had to reply to someone.
Okay. So do you need to move to improve you're getting the sun in your face?
Yeah, I need to wrap up in like 5 minutes here.
All right, well, we can wrap up now. So if you don't mind emailing me the PeopleNet or whatever it was, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, I will. I'll do that. Yeah, we'll do some stuff offline. Like I also can talk about, you know, some ideas and might be able to help you and stuff like that. So let's talk about it in a separate thing. We're not, you know, recording.
Well, I'm probably not going to put this little last part of it in the video. I'm going to edit this.
Yeah.
So all right. So
my other thing was I was doing. Did I tell you about the fact that I put the deposit down for 20 Cybertrucks?
Oh yeah. That's a popular business model.
Popular business model.
You're not the only one who's doing that. I know somebody who put down 130.
Yeah.
So just really quick, let me just close out the video. Brian, I want to thank you for coming on the channel and talking about this. I want to thank the Vasa Law Firm in Sweden and all my Patreon supporters for helping this channel grow. Check out the video description. I have a new political channel on locals.com if you're interested in hearing my political views. T-shirts and stainless steel water bottle at elonbits.com. And Brian, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks everyone for watching.